Hello, my name is Susanne Evans and welcome to the Change Stories podcast. This is a podcast for people who are interested in creating change, whether that is within organisations or for individuals. In each podcast episode, I will have a conversation with someone about their work to share their story. Each story and conversation will provide you with ideas and inspiration for your own organisation or for you personally. To find out more about each episode, including further reading, and to share your change stories, go to www.changestories.co.uk. Hello and welcome to the Change Stories podcast. My guest today is Dr Samantha Madhosingh, and we're going to be talking about her wonderful book, Evolving You. So Dr Samantha Madhosingh has dedicated her career over the past 2 decades to assisting leaders and teams with discovering their full potential and optimising their productivity, performance and progress without burning out. She's published many articles and book chapters on emotional intelligence, leadership and practical development topics. In Evolving You, she draws out the key skills that every leader needs to embrace for personal and professional transformation and impact that lasts. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Lovely to see you.
Likewise, I'm very excited to talk to you about your book because I've loved reading it. And there's some stuff that I'm going to pick out in detail which relates directly to my work around storytelling, but also around transformation, because the focus of this book really is what I could see is it's helping leaders transform and grow in their roles. Is that what you were intending to achieve in writing it?
Absolutely. It's that evolutionary process, right? So, and recognizing that it's an ongoing, continuous evolving. It's not a one and done, right? And that's what oftentimes people are looking for. They think that they just want a quick fix, but growth and transformation isn't that. And anyone trying to sell you a quick fix is trying to scam you. And change takes a little bit of time, right? So you can start the work and you can have immediate shifts and change. However, for it to last and to feel like it's part of who you are, that habit, it takes time for that to happen.
And I really like that idea of evolution, because it's often when I talk about organisational change, I talk about the idea of evolution, not transformation, because I think if we see something as a transformation, it's exactly as you say, that one and done, and then we're finished. Yeah. And in organisations, we have that kind of big change, steady state, big change, steady state. And actually this idea of ongoing growth and evolution, I think, is much healthier.
Absolutely, because I mean, as human beings are constantly evolving, right? So we're always, and the thing is, if you aren't, then you're stagnant, right? You're not growing, you're not shifting, and you're not changing. And having said that, there are people who aren't interested in growing and shifting and changing, and they're difficult to help them to see that there is a superpower in making those changes and growing, right? But it's what is necessary in organizations. It's what humans do. And if you're trying to reach your full potential and grow as a leader, it is something that you absolutely have to commit to.
And I was wondering, when I was reading it, whether there was a particular moment when you decided you wanted to write the book. Was it that you were experiencing things in your work that you felt like you had to share? Was it some form of personal experience? What led you to write this book at that time?
So what led me to do the work that I do was an experience myself of really bad leadership, actually really bad, having a really bad manager. It's actually why I ended up starting my own thing, was because I had this is the term I use, had my chain yanked in different directions too much in a very short period of time. I'd had amazing supervisors and managers leading up to this particular point, but I got a full version of what not to do and how to really be disruptive in a very negative way and have a really negative impact on your staff. And my daughter was 2 at the time. And what I noticed was the impact it had on me, and then how I was at home with her, because I was so stressed and I didn't like that. And my relationship with her and being present for her was more important to me than this great job I was making loads of money. I was like, oh, this is great. But it really, really wasn't. And that's what started me being interested in sort of understanding that how people function at work impacts how they are at home. So it's not just organizational, but it's that work that you do, the work that we do in our organizations impacts the kind of people we are in our house. And I'm all about, as a psychologist, wanting to make sort of home life better for people, right? So reducing the stress at work, giving people the skills that they need. So that's been the work. I think the book came from having the same conversations over and over and over and over and over and over. And I'm sure the same for you, right? With your book, is that all the training is the same, all the conversations, the coaching, all of that, even in therapy, like it's the same conversations over and over and over again. And I thought, maybe I should just put all of this in a book, because I'd wanted to write a book for ages, but I wasn't quite sure who it was for or what it was going to be for. But then it became, as I started to look at what it was that I was always talking about and the work that I was doing, that I was like, okay, so this is it.
That's so interesting. I mean, that resonates with me on a number of levels. One, the book thing, that suddenly it's so clear to you that these conversations that keep happening, you feel like, okay, there's a need for something to fill that gap that these conversations are clearly needed. But also your experiences at work, because I too went out on my own when my daughter was 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and from a similar experience where I loved the work, I loved what I did, but I didn't like the environment I was having to sit in, and I basically walked away from the big job to go out on my own. But at the time, it felt like the thing I had to do, because I knew if I didn't, I'd probably make myself ill, because it was stressful.
Yes, exactly. And and again, as a psychologist at heart, I don't want that for people, right? I don't want people to have to choose between their mental and emotional well-being and earning a good living. And the other thing too that I realize is that not everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know that I was fully cut out to be to work for myself. It's been a very interesting evolution itself, right? And because of that, we want to make work better, help people work together better, make organizations better, make leaders better. Because what I see is a lot of folks are getting promoted to management and supervisory roles who have no management and supervisory experience. They don't have the skill set. They don't have the mindset. They don't have any of the things that they really need. And then they make other people's lives miserable because of that. And so that's what this, for me, was about.
And I love the way the book is structured. I think it's so easy to read. But I really like also that there's lots of reflective activities and things to do, so that you can work your way through it and read the section and then do some work. And I think that's so important for someone to engage with it.
Absolutely. Because again, so I do a lot of training, and a lot of organizations, again, I know you should probably know this, they think, we just train them and then, that's it. We did one and done. And it doesn't work like that, because you have to engage with the material. And so, and applying the learning is a slide in every single presentation that I do, having a moment of reflection. What have you learned? What are some things that you can reflect on? And how are you going to apply this? What are you going to start doing? What are you going to stop doing? Because you have to think about that, because otherwise, and I'd say this in every training, if you don't implement it, it is meaningless. Right? I used to tell my therapy patients years ago, if all you do is just come and talk to me and engage with me once a week for some long period of time, you're not getting the full benefit of our work together. It's the work that you do outside the session that really gives meaning to what we're doing in here. And I think because I live by that, and that's in all my work, it had to be in the book as well.
I did the same in mine, and I really like the idea that someone will have scribbled all over my book and folded the pages down and marked.
I did that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that idea. I know some people get very upset about the idea of writing in books, but for me, it's a tool, isn't it? You want people to use it as a tool for their own development.
otherwise, again, what's the point of it? It's just become shelf help. But I wanted it, and I say this in the introduction, I wanted it to be something that you may read through one time, but that you come back to over and over again when you need when you're like, oh, wait, I need to just, reflect on this one thing, or I'm having this situation occur where let me go check that chapter out.
Yes.
How do I figure that piece out? So that's becomes the reason for the structure of it. Yeah, absolutely.
I really love that about it. And so what you've done is you've developed these 9 principles, which are the sort of the areas that you think people need to develop in and to grow. How did you choose them? Did they jump out at you? Was it on the basis of research or on your experience working with people, or a mixture of things?
It was quite the mixture of things, because they're things that for me are second nature, right? So again, because my work starts off as a psychologist, the inner work is the first 3 chapters are like, super easy. And then originally, I think, it might have been 7 chapters. And then, I had one kind of structure, but then I was like, wait, and I started looking at structures in other books, and I was like, if I reorganize this, I can have part 1, part 2, part 3, inner work, interpersonal work, and sustainability. And then once I had that, then I was like, this is what needs to go in this section. This is what needs to, and it just all just started to make sense, because before that, it was just chapters, just sort of thrown together. And it didn't have a structure that even made sense to me. It was just, because this is what they tell you when you write a book, just write it and then figure out the organizational pieces of it and the structure of it afterwards. And so that's what I did. Like I, put it all together. And then I was like, I can't quite figure out how, and the names of the chapters changed a little bit, but what they were about didn't, but just sort of making it a bit more interesting and stuff like that, and more reflective of what it was that I really wanted to say. But once, it was really interesting, because truthfully, once I just kept thinking, what are the different parts of this? How do I structure this? And I was like, and I remember going to my publisher, Allison, and I was like, oh my goodness, all these books, they have 3 parts or 4 or whatever. And I thought, these 3 parts make sense. And so then it was like, okay, because then I think I had 3 and 3 and then 2. And then I was like, what is, to make it even, what can I put to make it balanced? And so then I added in something else and sort of move things around into where it would make sense for those chapters, those pieces of those chapters to be. And it was so great. And again, I don't know if you had the same experience as you were writing your book. Once it has that structure, it starts to flow so well. And it's like, oh, this is what it can be like. But the one thing that you said, which has been the most common thing that's said about the book, is that it's easy to read. And that's what I actually wanted. I didn't want it to be overcomplicated. I'm not trying to make some literary masterpiece. I wanted it to be a useful tool. And people are busy. And if you give them, too much complications, they're not gonna, because they don't have time to reread it 3-4 times to get the meaning. I wanted them to be able to read it and catch the flow, and then have that aha moment and think, okay, I can do this. And that's what I've heard from people, is that it is easy to read and they like the flow of it, which is, again, given the fact that in the very beginning it didn't quite have a flow, the fact that it ended up with a flow is kind of cool.
Well, I think, the writing process is in its own way an evolution, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It just, you start off with something horrible, which is just, I found starting writing very difficult. And then it was just, you create, I think someone called it the vomit draft, where you're literally just, you vomit everything out, but also it makes you want to vomit because it's so painful. and it's a horrible thing, but you have to get it all out onto the page, and then you start finessing it. And I think I had exactly the same experience where once I'd got it sorted, then I couldn't stop writing. And and I had a particular weekend. My husband and I went away for the weekend, and he was skiing, and I don't ski anymore, and so I just sat writing, and I just couldn't stop writing, and it was like, oh my goodness, where's this been for the last 6 months? But it was because I think my thoughts were ordered, and then I knew what I wanted to do.
Yes, it's kind of interesting because back in the day when I was growing up, we didn't have computers, and so when I went to university. I had a typewriter, and then sort of one of those word processor things that they had, that like the little tape or the little window sort of right in the middle, and you could see, and you'd have to use Tipex or some other thing to, and you couldn't just make stuff up as you go along and then, come back. And so I don't actually know how people wrote books back in the day. And then, so when we got computers and people started saying, just put it in whatever order, it doesn't matter. I really struggled with that. So, when, as a psychologist, if I had reports to write when I was studying for university and stuff like that for my doctorate, I was like, I can't write like that. I can't just throw stuff in a Word document and then reorganize it later. Like I can now. It's taken me a long time, but it was really hard because the way that I learned to write was not like that.
I had a very similar experience, actually. And often when I was doing my doctorate, I sat there thinking my cousin had done one, but he's 12 years older than me. So I kept thinking, how on earth did he do his? Because he did his straight after university, whereas I didn't start mine till I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, I've rewritten this section so many times. How did he do it?
Yeah, exactly.
Typewritten.
Yeah.
And he had to draw the diagrams in pencil.
Oh my goodness.
How did that?
Oh, no. Again, I can't imagine. I can't imagine it at all.
So actually, now we all have this ability to to evolve, to create, to kind of get out there a bit more and try things, because we can start again. And I think that's a great thing that's happened.
Absolutely.
But you're right. So many of us learn that, especially with writing and creativity, that you feel like it's got to be perfect all the time, and stepping away from that is something I've definitely found challenging, but I'm getting better at. I think the book definitely helped.
Yes, definitely.
So starting at the beginning then of your book, I really like the fact the first section is about that work on the self, because I think my own experience in the work that I do is a lot of leaders don't make the time to reflect on themselves and their impact and how they work with others. So I really like the fact that that's where you started from, because that has to be the beginning point, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's the foundation. If you're not willing to be aware of who you are. So it's twofold, right? So one piece is getting to know yourself, being curious about who you are. And then the second piece is being observant as to how people respond to you, right? So, how do they respond to the things you say? How do they respond to, your way of leading? What are the interactions like? How are your words and your actions impacting other people? I think a lot of times, and then again, like I literally see it in some of the things that I do, even right now, where people come in, leaders come in, and they're like, we're going to do this. And with zero interest in the impact that will have, that course of action will have on the people, is not asked them, right? And so it's, having that self-awareness to your way of speaking as well, your tone, all of those things, is just being so curious and observant about who you are and having that self-awareness. You can't do anything else without that skill. And it's really interesting because I've actually met people who have never really spent time developing that curiosity about self, that self-awareness. And it's the foundation. It's like in your book, you talk about paying attention. It's paying attention to yourself.
But there's a certain discomfort, isn't there, with that sort of inner work that I think some people avoid. It's easier to keep looking out rather than...
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, people usually like pointing fingers at others. It's not me, it's you.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, again, in my work, the questions that I ask is, what's your role in this? Like, not necessarily, it's not about blame. It's just taking full responsibility for yourself. You know, how are you communicating? One of the things I talk about a lot is building bridges, right? So, you know, if I stay on my side and you stay on your side, we can never really work well together. But how do we meet in the middle? What does that even look like? How do we create a bridge towards each other? And a lot of the work that I do with folks is, you know, even if the other person is not even on the bridge, you can take steps to get closer to where they are, to figuring out, how do I help them to understand my point of view? What do they need and able to meet me in the middle? What understanding do they need? What language do I need to share with them? You know, what is it that I need to help build a bridge to them for them to come this way? And it's not, it doesn't have to be that we're both always stay on our sides and we don't meet in the middle. But if we're willing to give up something and try to understand where the other person is coming from, it's definitely helpful.
Very true. And I think I had a conversation yesterday with somebody about difficult conversations and how I hate that term. I like to talk about uncomfortable conversations. Yes. That, you know, they make us uncomfortable, but it's okay. We can cope with that. And I think so much of that is that you're on one side, I'm on the other, and we can't ever move towards each other. And having that view of, maybe I take a couple of steps towards where you are and you take a couple of steps towards where I am, and then we might find it a bit easier.
I think most people, well, not most people, a lot of people tend to avoid those conversations.
Oh,
so they sweep it under the rug, they pretend it doesn't happen, they compartmentalize, they stuff it down. It's like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. We're not having, I'm trying to avoid conflict. It's like, no, you cause more conflict in the end by avoiding having these conversations. You can live through them. It's just thinking about, okay, what do I want to say? What is it I want them to understand? How can I listen to them with empathy to understand where they are coming from as well? Because what most people really want is to be heard, right? And yes. So when you are on both sides of whatever the conflict is, if both people commit to really listening to where the other person is coming from, what it is that they're saying, it usually helps tremendously.
Absolutely. And the other thing I liked about that first part of your book, and it relates back to what we were talking about earlier in relation to our own writing experiences, is you use the phrase unlearning process of self-discovery and growth. And I really like that, because my own experience is exactly that you have to unlearn some stuff that you learnt in the past.
Absolutely. Because we think that they're true. We learned all these things. We are conditioned as we grow up. We're always taking in information. Our brain is a meaning-making machine, and it makes meaning out of things that it might not actually be accurate. It might not be true, but it's made that meaning. And I used to do a lot of work with people who were traumatized, and it was the negative stories that they had made up about who they are because of trauma that had me really thinking about the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are, about who other people are, and the impact of that. And so, it's all these things that we hold true, these beliefs that we hold as fact, things that people have said to us, teachers have said to us, friends, family, the media comes from every single direction. And we think that those things are absolutely factual, but it's the unlearning, it's acknowledging, okay, which of these things might not actually make sense for me, right? And what is this thing that I'm holding as a fact, as a truth, when maybe it isn't? And so it's unlearning that, and then thinking about, okay, what's the new learning? What's the new thing that I can learn in this place that is more empowering, and it helps me to evolve and grow?
And I think that's where you often need external help to do it, isn't it? Because uncovering those on your own can be really challenging.
It absolutely can, yeah.
We don't know. And even asking family and friends, they often see things from a different perspective because they have a different, our best interests at heart. And sometimes it's hard for them to share some of those difficult truths. But that's where it's so valuable to have a coach or a mentor or somebody who's external who can really support you in that work.
Well, absolutely. And I think part of the issue is that our friends and family are probably in the same conditioning as we are, right? And so they won't necessarily be able to see the blind spots and the things in the corners that we can't see either. Can they tell you, like, there's exercises that I have people do to really be able to allow themselves to be seen, to have someone that you really care about, tell you all the great things that they know about you, right? Because people need that cup filled as well. And, again, I have a very intuitive ear. When I listen to people, I do pick up their blind spots, those things that get in the way for them. Because they say things and it's like, wait, you think this? Wait, help me to understand, where does that come from? How did you go there? But your family's not going to notice that. They're not going to necessarily pick up on that. So that's where that training and work that I do comes in.
I had an experience of that myself. So when I was doing my doctorate, I had terrible writer's block, and I'd done all the research, done all the literature review, etc., etc., and I had to sit down and start writing the thing, and I just couldn't do it. I'd kind of got started, but I was really blocked from carrying on, and I took a break from doing it and got some coaching. And it was that helped me unlock it. And actually what was stopping me was I was afraid of what people would see and then what they would say. And I was convinced that people would laugh if they read my doctorate. And even saying it out loud, it seems ridiculous, but it was my coach that helped me get to that point and then say to me, is that true? Is that likely to happen? And then sort of you unpack it and you think, well, no, of course it isn't. But if I hadn't had that external support, I'm not sure I would have got to that way, that realization if that's what was holding me back.
Yes. I had a coach years ago who had this phrase, which I have found very useful sometimes in my coaching of other people, but it was really helpful to me in situations like what you're describing, is what's the worst that could happen?
Yes.
Right. What's the worst that could happen? And then she kept asking, and I would say something, and then she'd ask me again. And then I have to take it further and again and again and again. And then we got to a place and I was like, well, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
There's some point along the way where there's going to be an intervention. I'm going to stop, or I'm going to do something different. And so it wouldn't necessarily get to this place. But again, it's a brain thing. Your brain is saying, this awful thing is going to happen if you continue. And so it stops you. And we call it a comfort zone, but I think that's an oxymoron. I think it's actually really uncomfortable because you know that there's something for you beyond that space, but your brain is locking you down. And because it believes that if you take that step outside, you will die. Like literally, that's what it thinks, right? So for your brain, being chased by a lion and, going to do public speaking is essentially the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so it will stop you because it thinks that if you do that thing, if you're rejected, if you say the wrong thing and, people laugh or whatever, that you will die. Like it will be fatal. And it's coaching absolutely hands down helps with that. And what it can also do is give you the tools to be able, because at least for me, every time I speak in a new setting, it comes up for me again. And of course, so what I do is I have all these things that in the moment I can coach myself and get myself to calm down. And I talk about this actually in the book. A story of when I was speaking on a stage in Vegas. And leading up to it, I had a Fitbit. It's broken now, but I have had this Fitbit. And I was sitting in the hotel room and I looked at my Fitbit and my heart rate at the time was as if I was exercising. And I thought, oh my goodness. And I had never actually noticed that before because, my heart rate's not monitored like that. I was like, oh my goodness. So I was like, okay, you really need to calm yourself down. Like you're winding yourself up. And so, I called a friend and just, to kind of help. And that helped quite a bit and, just talk myself through it. In the end, I actually left the room and went and joined the group. Because being in the room with them just dissipated a lot of it. And then right before I was about to speak, it started coming again. But I have a physical shaking thing that I do to kind of physically disperse that energy from my body. But it does, like these things keep cropping up. And so having coaching and also having your own tools to do that self-coaching in the moment is very helpful.
And I really like the stories that you told in the book. I mean, obviously, I love storytelling, so I was very interested in reading those. But I think it makes it easier to understand, but also very personal, because I think you are not presenting yourself as, I've never had any of these issues and I'm going to tell you how to sort everything out. I too have experienced all of these, and I think that's nice for people to read.
Well, it's kind of, so two things. Firstly, it's interesting because I've never thought of myself as a storyteller. People are like, oh, what are your stories? And I'm like, I don't have any stories. Like, I just, and a lot of them come to me in the moment. Like, it's very difficult for me to sort of plan things or plan stories because it doesn't come. It usually just literally comes in the moment. With sharing the personal things. So when I was a psychologist, the way that I was trained was that you shared absolutely nothing with your clients. Nothing. And for years, I did that. And so even the kids, when I used to work in a school, they'd be like, oh, Dr. Madhosingh, you're so perfect. Da, da, da. And in my head, I'd be like, if you
only knew.
But then it started, when I started my own practice, it really started to bother me, because I was just like, these are other adults, and, and they would say, your life is so perfect, you couldn't possibly understand, and da, 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 da. And I was like, I've had it. I can't keep doing this. And so I wrote an ebook actually at the time, and I literally outed myself. So I talked about having depression and the things that I learned how to do to help myself get out of that. I talked about at the time when this was many years ago, that when I had depression, that I was on medication. Like, I understood the entire thing. I understood the frustration of it. I understood, a lot of different things. And I felt so much better. And it freed me to just then, because now it was public and I didn't have to hide, but it also freed me to be able to share those stories with my clients. And also it shows my own evolution, right? It shows me working on myself and continuously working on myself. Because the depression was when I was doing my doctorate. I actually mentioned that in this book as well. And I came this close to being kicked out of the program. And so a psychology program filled with psychologists, and that was the route that they were taking. So
the irony.
It wasn't lost on me, but in some ways it took me a long time to get to the place of being able to see that what a favor they did for me, actually, because instead of being so depressed and apathetic and unable to move, I became angry and energized with fighting the system. Right. And that gave me enough fuel to then start fighting for myself, which is what I really needed to do at that time. And it's what got me through everything and able to finish and complete. And, but it also, something that you were saying earlier, sort of this imposter syndrome that I have struggled with over the last many decades is from that. They didn't believe in me. And, so that had a significant impact. That conditioning, as temporary as it was, had such a significant impact on who I thought I was, and always feeling like I have something to prove to myself and to everybody else, because of course everyone's going to see that maybe they were right. And so we keep growing, keep evolving, and we keep unlearning as many times as we have to, is essentially what I have learned myself.
And I think, going back to your point that you said about not being a storyteller, I hear that all the time with leaders that I work with. And I think, again, it's a form of conditioning.
Yes.
That we see storytelling as this special thing.
Yes.
That you have to be very entertaining, or you have to be really funny. Yeah. And actually, it isn't. And that is the reason I wrote my book, is because I kept hearing that over and over again. I can't tell stories, Susanne. I'm not a storyteller, blah, blah, blah. And actually, we all have stories. And it's, outside of work, most of our communication is story-based. So if you go out for dinner with friends, you'll spend most of the evening telling stories. So we can all do it. we just kind of forget in a business context. And so I was really delighted to see there was a whole section of your book about leaders using storytelling in their communications, because I think it's a real barrier for people that they can't see that they can do it, but actually they can. We all can.
Absolutely. So just for transparency, in the initial version of the book, my first draft, even second draft, it wasn't in there. And it was from the people that I sent my book to give me feedback. One piece of feedback was, this is a piece that you're missing in the communication section. And I talk about it. When I do training on communication, it is something that I do include. But it just didn't click. So I was like, okay, good. So I went and I included it. And you're right. It is such a powerful skill, to be able to tell the story of so many different things. I mean, I think on the one hand, it's similar to what I was saying. Like, if you, as a leader, people want to know that you really care about them, you really care about the work that we're doing. And it's the stories we tell that help them to feel that connection to you.
Absolutely. And actually it's how our brains work. So you talked earlier about how the brain's meaning making.
Yeah.
And we do that through storytelling and creating the story of what we think we're seeing and feeling and hearing. One of the things I do with leaders, when they're saying, oh, I can't remember any stories, or I can't, I don't think I know any, is I get them to start making a story log of stuff, and it doesn't need to be fancy. I use a table in a Word document where one side is the story, the bare bones of the story. The other side is some keywords that I can search for. So I could put, this one's about performance management, or this one's about coaching, or this one's about change. And then I can search for them. And every time something happens to me, or I hear something, or I see something, I can just put it in there. And then I don't need to worry about forgetting it. And that then frees that part of your brain of, I can't remember any, that you've always got some at your fingertips.
Excellent. I love it.
Top tip. But it's like fantastic. What you're saying about having those tools and structures around enabling you to do the thing.
Yeah. I think it's sort of that, having those things at your fingertips and taking the time to at least first do the brain dump, right? So putting those things in there. Like, one of the things that I run into with people is, so when people change jobs or they evolve into something new, they tend to go into that new thing forgetting all the stuff that they already know. And it's like, you bring all of that with you. You may start in a new role in a new company and whatever, but you're still the same person. So one of the things I have them do is create a success journal and write all the successes that you've had, up to small things, little things. It doesn't have to be big, magnificent things, just little things. And then once you've done it once, then each week, do some reflections and add some new things to it. And so again, it's this thing. So when you're having a tough day and you're like, the whole world is going to hell in a handbasket, or you think for yourself, something's gone wrong and I'm just nothing, no one, whatever, you can pull it out and look at it, and it reminds you of who you really are. And I think that's really helpful.
Oh, hugely. I've got a folder of nice emails. So
there you go.
Nice emails that I've been sent from clients, people I've worked with. And if I'm having a really bad day, I can sit and look at them and just kind of go, oh, okay, I'm all right. I'm doing okay.
Exactly. Today's just a tough day and tomorrow's a new day. Yeah. Just let it go and move on. Yeah.
Exactly.
Leave today where it is and all the challenges of today and start fresh tomorrow.
I love that. So the final bit of your book is about that kind of sustainability. How do you keep this going in the future? And I was really interested in that because you hear a lot about burnout and overwhelm, and everyone's got too much to do and all of that. How does that fit in that sort of space? So keeping this change going, keeping evolving. How do you balance that with day to day and not getting overwhelmed?
So the one thing that people generally are really terrible at doing is taking care of themselves. Everyone believes that they're too busy to do the basics, right? And I literally talk about this in every training. And when they tell me what they're going to start, stop, and continue doing, taking better care of themselves is usually at the top of that list, because people are not sleeping very well. People think that they can function on 4 or 5 hours a night consistently for a long period of time. And I'm like, your brain is dying. Like literally, it needs more rest. Your body needs more rest. You will function better with more rest. You'll have better productivity if you have more rest. You've got to fuel your body properly, eat properly, get some exercise. I've had clients who all work remotely. And so I've had people who wear Fitbits and they have like less than 500 steps a day. Wow. And I am just like, okay, yeah, this cannot continue. Right. And so, I had clients who would say they've forgotten to shower. They've spent the whole time like working. And I said, this is not sustainable. In order for sustainability, you have to take care of yourself. I've had over the years, even as a therapist, people would end up coming to me from the hospital because they their whole body shut down. And the thing that I often tell them, there's this quote that I paraphrase from Oprah, which is, when things are starting to go wrong or there's a problem, you get messages in whispers, and if you ignore them, the whispers will get louder and louder and louder until it's a scream. And I always caution people not to wait until it's a scream. And I can promise them, and I always tell them this, if you refuse to take care of yourself, your body or your mind will shut you down. The way your body does it is with illness. So if you get sick, you have to stop because you don't have any choice. It will shut you down that hard. And I tell my clients, like, I don't want to see you in the hospital, so please pay attention. And again, I have had people, this has happened, and then they're like, oh, they've had mini strokes, they've had all kinds of things. And that's why it's in the book, because it's like, it's the same conversation I have. I do it in my trainings and with my clients, it's the same conversation. How are you taking care of yourself? You need to properly exercise. You need to go out in nature. People are like, oh, but it's so hot. It's this, it's that. But find a way, find something, and just get yourself together. There's no sustainability without self-care. There's just none. And that's the foundational piece of that bit. And then, there's the resiliency. But, I think the issue with resiliency is that people think that means that you can be in a really crappy environment and we can just keep chucking things that you just have to, stand up and stiff upper lip, as we say here in
yes.
But it's, again, it shouldn't be that, right? So it's, how do we create the culture that is a better environment for everybody to thrive in? And resiliency is, because things are going to go wrong, and I call it going left. Like left happens all the time. Like, things turn left, they go left. It's like, oh my gosh. Because you think, oh, this is the way things are going. This is the way things are going. It's going this way. And then there's and it's in those moments, it's like, okay, how do I regroup? How do I just pause, reflect, and then, get myself back on track? So that for me is resilience, not that you should be in a toxic environment and it's just an awful place. Because as you and I both know, sometimes it's best to just leave those environments. It's not worth your mental health. It's not worth your physical well-being to be in a place like that unrelentingly. It's not. I don't.
No, I do think resilience has become a bit of a difficult concept, because I think so often it is used in the negative way, in that, you just have to bounce back from absolutely everything. And
yes. No matter how bad. And
quick, get back to normal, and it's
yes. Your mum passed away, or you've had something terrible has happened, and you're expected to just be back at work in 2 days, or, and it's like, and just to hold it all together. And it's like, that's just ridiculous. I don't subscribe to that at all.
It's become quite a toxic term, I think, a bit like, toxic positivity. It's become a bit toxic in the way it's used, I think.
Brush it off.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
The final thing I just wanted to talk to you about, which I really liked in the book, was it's right at the end, but it's your emotion vocabulary, because I absolutely loved it. I often talk in my work about the change curve, and that's often trotted out in Change, and I hate it because it's so linear and suggests everyone reacts to things in the same way and that you'll all go through it in the same stages, and there's like 5 emotions you can have.
Of course.
And I love this, and I will be using it in my work with my clients, because you've got a whole set of emotions that you can pick from. And I think opening up that conversation about how you feel and how others feel is massively important.
Yes, absolutely. The thing is, again, all these things come from my clients. I had a client years ago, and I was asking her about her emotions, and she would say, like, I can't find the words. I don't know how best to describe that, besides being sad or whatever. And that's what started it for me. And so it was giving someone homework to, try to peel back the layers and look at what other feelings are there under there. Because I do believe that if we have a robust language with which to be able to describe what we're actually really feeling, because being angry is, in my opinion, different from being enraged, right? At least for me, qualitatively, there are times when I really do feel enraged about certain things. And then there are times where something just I find annoying and pissed off. And those things are different. So being able to talk about things and the nuanced difference of our emotions, I think it's when we can express ourselves in words better, I think people start to act out emotionally less. So there's less need to act out emotionally if you can fully express yourself through words. And so it is teaching even kids, giving kids that language. But again, it started from having clients who felt like they did not have robust language with which to be able to describe their experiences. And again, it's not a be all end all, but it is something, it's a good start. And that's, again, why I put it in there.
I loved it. And I think in change programs, there's a real place for that, because for so long, I think people have been made to feel if they feel differently about something that's happening to everyone else, then they're the weird one. And actually, we will all have different reactions to things going on in our organisations based on our previous experiences. So
absolutely,
being able to open up that conversation is massively important.
Absolutely, 100%.
So just to finish then, if people want to find out more about you and your work and your brilliant book, where should they go?
So I have a website. It's askdrsamantha.com, and I'm on LinkedIn. So come look for me there. Those are the 2 best places, I would say.
Fantastic. Well, as I say, I love the book. I know other people will love it too. It's so useful, so important. Thank you for chatting to me today. It's been fantastic.
Wonderful. I loved every minute of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Change Stories podcast. I love this conversation, and I hope you did too. Thanks as ever to my wonderful guests and to Pete Morgan at Monkey Pants Productions for making the podcast sound amazing. If you want to find out more about this or any other episodes of Change Stories, go to www.changestories.co.uk, where you will find all the episodes and show notes. If you have enjoyed listening, please rate and review the Change Stories podcast on your podcast listening platform. And do please let me know if you have ideas or requests for future episodes. You can contact me and find out more about change and storytelling on my website, www.feldsparconsulting.com. Thanks again for joining in with the Change Stories conversation.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.